So here are two types of defense. We had innate, which are non-specific defenses, which is our first line, which is our skin, tears, or the lysozyme in our tears, mucous membranes, and stomach acid. And then we also had our second line of defense, which was our inflammatory response. Those are both non-specific. Doesn't matter the microbe or the pathogen, they were going to try and defeat them regardless. Now with our specific defenses, this is our acquired immunity. And in this situation, it's a very specific type of defense. So when we look at a pathogen that maybe enters into our body and gets past our first and our second line of defense, and it's traveling throughout our bloodstream, we need a way to defeat this. But first, let's go ahead and review the two different types of ways that a pathogen could circulate throughout our body. Well, one of them is our circulatory system. So we could have our blood. There's pathogens circulating inside of our blood, maybe a virus or something. But also we have a lymphatic system. And a lymphatic system carries clear fluid called lymph from our tissues and tries to deliver it back into our circulatory system. So you can see here, those lymphatic vessels going to carry the lymph fluid and drop it back into our circulatory system right before the blood enters our heart. And the heart will beat and then pump our blood out. So we look at the lymphatic tissues, basically they're their own separate vesicles. And so here, if you have your capillaries, if fluid leaks out of our capillaries, like clear fluid, the lymphatic vessels are going to collect it back. So these green lymphatic vessels are going to collect that fluid from the tissues and try and deliver it back into our circulatory system. And as you can see, our lymphatic vessels also play a role in our immune system. So here you have lymphatic vessels traveling throughout our body, and along the way there's something called lymph nodes. So with a lymph node, as the fluid flows through a lymph node, this is going to be like a tiny house or tiny apartment, I guess, for white blood cells. So if we had a virus in our lymphatic fluid and it flows into the lymph node, then maybe a macrophage hanging out there is going to engulf it. And then we'll see as the PowerPoint continues what happens. And then the fluid continues and it will drop into our circulatory system. Okay, so our lymphatic system's role in the immune system. Basically, we have two kinds of lymphocytes. We have our B cells, and our B cells are created in our bone marrow, and that's where they'll stay and mature there. Then we also have our T cells. Our T cells, T lymphocytes, are also created in our bone marrow. However, they don't stay there. They're actually going to travel to our thymus. And it's in our thymus that they finish their development. So B and T cells are both made in the bone marrow. However, B cells stay there and mature, while T cells travel to the thymus and mature there. So when we look at our lymphatic system, we have lymph nodes which are part of it. So our lymph nodes, keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier, are where we might find lymphatic cells, lymphocytes, B cells, T cells, but also macrophages and other dendritic cells. So here we have macrophages, dendritic cells, and lymphocytes that kind of live in these lymph nodes, attacking microbes that might circulate in that lymphatic fluid. We also have our spleen. Now our spleen is part of our circulatory system. And so our spleen acts as a filter to kind of filter old red blood cells that get recycled there, as well as some white blood cells being stored there. Now for some reason I always picture the spleen kind of like a fishing net of some kind that like kind of will trap things circulating in our blood. So the speen's about 4 inches long on your left side of your body. Okay, so now here's the cell. And this cell has something on its surface. And these purple things represent carbohydrate chains that will identify the type of cell. Now in this situation, these purple things are identifying the cell as belonging to me. It says, hi, I'm a Misty Mars cell. Now every single cell in my body has the exact same carbohydrate chains. This is important because now my immune system knows, wow, these cells belong here and it won't attack them. So these carbohydrate chains are identical on all my cells, and it helps my immune system figure out self versus non-self. So cells that are considered self, S-E-L-F, are Misty Mars cells. Non-self would be like a visiting microbe or like a bacteria. Could be part of a virus, I guess, even though it's not really a cell. Or even like if I got a transplant, If my brother donates a kidney to me, his carbohydrate chains are going to be different because we're not identical, and therefore my body might reject it. So this is important because when we get exposed to pathogens, the molecules on the surface of a pathogen are going to be different than the surface markers on my blood, on my cells in my body. So you can see here this pathogen, its identity markers are different than mine, which makes it easier for my immune system to recognize it as a foreign invader. Now you also notice that I have these little red triangles labeled as antigens. So antigens are really technically antibody generators, but they are either proteins or polysaccharides and are unique on each type of pathogen. So when I get a pathogen inside of my body, my immune system is going to hopefully recognize those red triangles, those antigens, as being different from the rest of my cells. And this will stimulate an immune response to try and defeat it. So when we look at our immune responses, once we have a pathogen inside of us, we have two options. We have humoral immunity as well as cell-mediated immunity. And so that's what we're going to go into next.